Oh, hello. Welcome to the basement. And your final exam. Instructions.
Today, the only job you really have is to consider the instructions I'm about to read to you and how you will approach them for the next month. It is April break. My colleagues and I, we've taken to calling it April not break. So while you must attend class today, I'm keeping it a thinking day so that there is no assigned work coming out of today's class, and there is little assigned work for during today's class except to respond to my exit ticket question, which will be posted at some point during the block. I have Classroom almost ready to go, so I will switch up cameras and give you a tour of the final individual oral. It has its own topic in Classroom. Everything that you need today will be under this IO.1, instructions and schedule. That's where you found the video that you're watching now. We'll have the general overview, which is a shared reference point for both of us to refer back to what we're trying to accomplish. But really, it is developing this calendar that tells us what we need to do. We're here. You just turned in your final portfolio reflection. That's number 6. And I'm delivering the final IO overview as I've instructed myself to do. There is Wednesday. If you need me, you can reach out by email and I will respond. But then Thursday and Friday, we're all going to go silent because we're going to take a little remote learning break. And then May. It makes sense to work backwards and consider that May is broken up into 2 sections. There is the actual IO from Memorial Day to the end of the school year. And then there's preparation for the IO that begins when you return from April not break. The calendar has 1, 2, 3, 4 days set aside for recording these IOs. These IOs will be recorded in appointments that you set up with me. This won't be on any of the instruction sheets anywhere because the instruction sheets are all designed for a typical school year. This is not a typical school year, so we'll talk a little bit about how the IO is actually going to be conducted right here, and then I'll jump back to the schedule. So, what we have to do is we have to record the IO remotely. The best way to do that is through Google Meet. So we'll set up a Google Meet that is one-on-one. On your end, you will need to make sure that you have that 15 minutes set aside where someone knows not to come in to your room or to be silent in the living room if you're doing it in a public space. Try to keep it at a minimum of people in and around the home at that time. Make sure it's a distraction-free environment. Of course, continue to consider the privacy concerns. We shouldn't show either of us anything that we would not see under normal school conditions because it will be 15 minutes one-on-one. The procedure will be to use an appointment calendar where you'll sign up the appointment. I will assign a Google Meet to that appointment. Once that appointment is underway, we'll both join each other in the Meet. I will be running recording equipment on my computer. I will say to you, I'm about to start recording, so that you know that from that moment on, I'm now recording you. That needs to be very clear. Again, privacy concerns. We'll do the IO. The IO will complete, and then I will say I've turned off the recording and bid you adieu. That would be the end of our school year together. If we get close to the end of the year and there's some full class gathering that we can do as a last goodbye so that the goodbyes aren't these weird one-on-one Google Meets, we'll do that as well. But for now, that's how the IOs will be conducted. In this time, these appointments will be during our school block, our regularly scheduled 80-minute block. However, you'll see that on the 3rd, it's just R1 and R2, which is supposed to be just the morning. It's not actually being called final exams this year, but we're still keeping a final exam schedule, so there'll be space for more appointments here. And I'm also going to open up some appointments on some silver days as well to see if anybody wants them. Otherwise, I won't be able to get through everybody in the appointments that I have planned out. Those appointments must be made by this Friday. It will be the last class day to ask me any last-minute questions or warn me of any issues that have come up, because the next time I will see you, you will be taking your final exam. According to IB, you must have your chosen extracts and outlines turned into your teacher a week ahead of time. So that means that this targeted instruction day is the due date for everybody, because the first students to do their IO will begin doing their IOs this Wednesday here. It is on this day that I will make the appointments available. There will be a link and a time that they become available, and it's going to be first come, first serve. This is a open class day that is the prep between what we're going to start when we get back from April Knot break, which is conferences. So this is the last chance to make any changes to the extracts and outlines that you're planning to turn in the very next day. When we get back from April Knot break, you can see here there's IO Prep 1. We're going to discuss all works a little bit and then turn you loose to make your preliminary plans. A Google form will be assigned where you will say, I want to do this work, and I think these are the ideas that I'll be talking about, and you'll turn it in by this Friday. I'll be able to do 6 conferences a day during these classes, where I will look at the form and ask you to talk to me a little bit about what you've turned in on that form, and we'll pick each other's brains in these conferences. There's conferences going to be available here by appointment, and these silver days and this last red day are other times where I'll be available to talk about what you've chosen. Okay, and that brings us back to what we're doing today. Okay, so the rest of this is going to be going through that instruction sheet. So if it makes sense, open up the instruction sheet in a second tab and read it along with me. It's going to be instruction reading, so I don't have any real good way of making that interesting, but if it's helpful to have me read and explain as I would if it was up on the projector behind me in class, that's where the video is going to go from here. Individual oral assessment. The purpose of the IO is for you to provide commentary on a global issue presented in one component from an English language work we have studied and one component from a work in translation. Specifically, this means that you must work with one of the following texts: Things Fall Apart, Heart of Darkness, and Master Harold and the Boys, and one of the following texts: Chronicle of a Death Foretold, Castellanos Poetry, and Persepolis, and technically a text called To Live, which is available. If you're totally stumped, we can get you a copy, but technically that's in our curriculum as well. You must have a specific and clear global issue presented in the 2 works, although the treatment of that global issue could be quite different. Your individual oral must address the prompt, examine the ways in which the global issue of your choice is presented through the content and form of 2 of the works that you have studied. A couple clarifications to cover here. It says it in the instructions, but probably in our language it's best to understand that the have to that you're facing here is that when you make your picks, you're picking 2 books, but one comes from first semester, Africa, and one comes from second semester, works in translation. There's no mixing them up. So while the Africa texts work really well together, and we did a lot of practice showing ourselves that we can do this idea of seeing a global issue in more than one work, we were building that. The requirements of the assessment, this is an IB requirement, is that one work must be in your language. You speak English predominantly in this class. And one work must be in a language that is not your own, i.e. a work in translation. We have to do that. So while Castellanos and Gabriela Garcia Marquez are seeing very similar things because they're both authors of Hispanic Latin descent, we can't do it. You must be doing a handshake between our 2 semesters of work. The second thing to talk about is this idea of one global issue, which are still behind me over there. That needs to be pretty clear. It's clear in your open. In my discussion, I will be focusing on the global issue of your very specific global issue that you have found. Again, because of the way that we have built up this assessment, you know all the skills within, but we've never quite deployed it in this way. So when we looked at the Castellanos poetry, for example, that's where you did 2 works. But there were 2 works by the same author, so the global issue is easy to spot because it was in several of her works, and the commentary that you made was probably pretty singular. She looked at the global issue the same way, using some of the same techniques in both of those poems that you chose. So, what will happen here is while you may see a singular global issue in 2 of the works, because the authors and the local contexts and the forms, poetry, drama, novel, graphic novel, because those things are changing, the commentary that the authors are making on the global issue may be a bit more varied. So while it is really helpful to have that through line, I'm always talking to you in your writing and your commentaries of like, well, what's the through line? Why does this next sentence talk to the sentence that I just read and is setting me up for the sentence that I'm about to read? It's a big thing for me that I think you could be clearer in what is the purpose of the order that you are rolling your argument out to me with. One of the things to consider here is that transition between the 2 works could be saying, while this author uses blank to say blank about this one global issue, this other author uses blank to say something entirely different blank about this one global issue. Okay, so that last sentence where it says you must have a specific and clear global issue presented in the 2 works, the treatment could be quite different. It also could be sort of different, because if you take a play, Master Harold, and compare it with a graphic novel, Persepolis, you're comparing elements of stagecraft with the elements of drawing. So there's naturally going to be different literary techniques in your conversation. But then maybe that viewpoint is the same. So there's a lot of flexibility here, which is why there's a lot of prep in the next week as you narrow down what is the 2 works that I will be focusing on. So that is the homework assignment, which is to think about the course as a whole and begin thinking about what are the 2 works, one from semester 1 and one from semester 2, that you'll be talking about. That's why thinking about it is almost enough for a homework assignment. Back to the nitty-gritty. This is your internal assessment. You'll see it abbreviated IA for IB English, meaning your teacher, me, will score it for IB, and that score will be externally moderated by IB. It means that I send numbers, and they may select my numbers, listen to your work, and decide whether or not my grade is accurate. 20% of the IB grade for diploma certificate students. Culmination of the focus we have put on oral commentary skills this year. 10 minutes in length for your prepared response. Brief questions, discussion to follow. This is the second reason there's a big chunk of prep time. That 10 minutes, I'm going to follow up with my colleagues who have done the IO format before. I am almost nearly certain that because of that 10-minute, you get 10 minutes, use those 10 minutes, that if you speak for only 6 minutes, those 4 minutes between when I start asking you questions and the end of your 6 minutes could be an uncomfortable 4 minutes of silence because you're afforded the 10 minutes. So I needed to check on how strict that is if like the 8th minute runs around and you're still saying, I don't know what else to say. I'll see how much I'm allowed to put you out of your misery and start asking you some follow-up questions because I can detect that you're done, but you're really going to want to have it practiced so that you are within that last minute. Because if you get to 9 minutes 30 seconds, 9 minutes 15 seconds, and I hear that conclusionary sentence, if I'm looking at the clock, I'm going to say, it's time to ask you a question. We've essentially got there. Let's keep it natural. But if you're at 6 minutes, you needed to have practiced more to do a more formal critique, more formal discussion. Our grade, the BHS grade, what goes into your Power School, 10 points in competency A, 10 points in competency P, 20 points in competency N. The same that all of these have essentially been worth since the second semester started. We would have normally considered increasing that, but we're keeping everything low because we want more of your in-school learning to count than your remote school learning. Extract of no more than 40 lines selected from each work, representative of the presence of the global issue. You will use unannotated, in other words, blank copies of extracts during your I.O. Copies of the extracts chosen must be provided to the teacher for approval before the assessment takes place. See calendar. You'll be provided a form to create the outline. The form will allow you to make a maximum of 10 bullet points. They must not be excessively long. All of this you've done before. Clean unmarked copies may only take the extracts and the outline into the room where the individual assessment will take place. Technically, I am going to be inspecting your workspace when your camera is on, so you will need to be camera on for this because I am looking to see that you have only blank copies with you. We won't treat this like some sort of spy movie where I'm trying to peer at your desk with a mirror or something. We're just going to say that we're doing this because we're supposed to be doing this honorably. I'm going to trust you, but still we'll have the camera on so that we're following those guidelines. As noted above, you're recording this, I'm recording this, I'm taking the extracts, I'm taking the outlines in case somebody wants to see it at IB to moderate me, essentially. Okay. Tips and advice. Works selected must have a clear connection with the global issue. In addition, considering your 40-line limit, also refine your extract size to be focused. There is no reason to search for 40 lines if you do not need an extract of that size. In other words, that's the maximum. It's not the minimum. It's the maximum. So if you have 20 lines and you know that I'm going to talk about this global issue in this 20 lines, you don't have to come to me and say, should I get more? No, you don't. You don't need to get more. If that's where the global issue is present, why flesh it out to 40 lines and then never refer to those other 20 lines of fluff that you included? Well-supported argument. How does each work represent and explore the global issue you have chosen? Extracts should clearly show significant moments when the global issue is being focused on. You should be identifying a single global issue for both works, but recognize and explore the way in which the works treat the issue differently based on different local contexts and the different literary forms. It was so important to me that I made it a bullet point. So all that stuff that I was saying way up at the top with the underlines, that's that bullet point right there. You should also effectively expand your discussion to the works as a whole. And the schedule, here's some bullet points here, but I essentially already went over the schedule with you on the big calendar. You can look at that and see if there's anything that has been left unclear. The Google form that you will need to fill out for me, that is due the Friday after we get back. I'll be making that available after we get back. Essentially turning you loose to be thoughtful, to email me questions if there's an early concern that you have. But at this point, it is a thought exercise. Go through your learner portfolio, start to narrow down what works you believe you'll want to do your final exam on, and just have those works bubbling around in your head. And when we get back, I bet having those things kind of just percolating there in the background will let some real lightning bolts strike. All right. That's what I have for today. Be looking for an exit ticket question of sorts to come out later in the block to be your attendance, and have a restful, as much as it's possible in this environment, rest of your week. I'm here for you if you need me.